look, Tarek, we're just not going to sign you. Sorry. Like, we think you're a decent player. You just don't have enough experience. I'm sitting there. I'm like, not enough experience. Like, how else am I supposed to get experience if I don't get an opportunity? like, okay, I can understand experience, but it's like, shouldn't some of that be merit based? Like, shouldn't players have to earn it? Whatever. But I let it go. It's not like I burned a bridge with him or anything. I just was respectful through that interaction. I left pretty disappointed. Like, damn, now I look like an idiot. I'm gonna call Louisville coach again. He's gonna think I'm some bum who just I wasn't good enough for Sacramento, and so now what's he gonna think? Talk to Louisville coach again, and I ended up getting a worse offer. He was a man of his word. Got a worse offer. So I'm like, you know what? This is all I have right now. James' background, he's had experience in the Premier League, in the English Championship. He's had enough experience for me to be like, you know what? I could probably learn a thing from him. The organization looks like they're kind of headed in the right direction, even though they're brand new. Again, another brand new organization. Mind you, this is the early days of USL, so most organizations every year was like you had another 2 or 3 at least every year. And so I ended up signing with Louisville. That process of me signing with them was different than any other process that I'd gone through, just because James was super detail oriented. This guy was having like Zoom interviews with guys like prior to actually signing their deals. He wanted to know about their character. That was like the most important aspect to the player in his mind. He would literally give you scenarios. I remember it was him and his assistant on the Zoom or Skype call probably back then. I don't even know if Zoom was around. But they would sit there and be like, so if we asked you after training to give an extra 15, 20 minutes to work on some individual stuff, like, would you be willing? What would your reaction be? This and that. He would ask me questions like that, like very specific questions. And obviously, I'm never going to say, oh, no, I'd be pissed. Nah, it depends if I'm tired. I never answered like that. But I responded truthfully, too. It wasn't like it wasn't genuine. And so ultimately, it got to the point where he was asking me to self-assess myself. Like, what do I think my strong points, my weak points, this and that? You can't bullshit someone. If someone has watched you enough, he knows probably your best and worst qualities, especially if he knows what he's talking about. And so, I was truthful and honest in everything that I was telling him through my self-assessment. And so ultimately, he ended up offering me the contract. I signed, got to Louisville, and that was probably the most important decision I could have made to end up going to Louisville. Not that I had so many other backup plans, but it was something that definitely transformed and shaped my career to be like a proper professional. Like, this is the culture and environment that I now set my expectations to everywhere I go. So I've carried that with me throughout all these years. That was starting in 2015 when I went to Louisville. So since then, I'm going to be, it's 2023, is eight seasons since then that I still carry. I'm like, this is how a club should operate. This is how the culture should be. This is what the standards should be like every single day, from a player all the way into every single person in the front office, like that. So definitely very transformative going to Louisville, for sure, I would say.
Were you the expected starting center back at the time, or did he call you and say, hey, we're going to sign you, but you still have to compete?
He was super focused on you could lose your spot regardless if you played 90 minutes on the weekend before and played your best game of your career. If you don't show up to work every day with the right mentality, your job is up for grabs, essentially. It's not like everyone's playing on thin ice. Like, it really kind of exposed guys who are maybe weaker mentality, and it really shined the light on the guys who are strong character, strong mentality, ready to rise to occasion, versus like falling and crumbling under the pressure. Thankfully, through his scouting process, he was able to kind of weed out the guys that were maybe a little bit weaker mentality and didn't have a good approach to having, well, it was a lot of stress. It's stressful, going into every day knowing you're fighting for minutes on the weekend, regardless if you haven't played a minute in weeks or months. But it's also, it should be very motivating for guys, as long as the process is actually honest and truthful and he's keeping his word with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was good. I loved it.
That's great, man. It seems like you guys were very much aligned on that. You're talking about everything needs to be merit based. Everything needs to be, there's checks and balances to everything. Because I know we know as coaches, and I had our head coach from the Lights here, and we were discussing something about how don't ever introduce something that you can't continue. So for him, it was always like, if we're going to do player assessments and we're telling the players at the beginning of the season that we will sit down with them once, twice a month to review the film, when we offer that, it has to be there. We can't slip up on that, because you can be looked at as someone who's hardworking and all that, but as soon as you miss one video session, or they're following up with you and you keep saying, "Oh, we're too busy," then you've lost them. And
for sure,
that's not even you touching the field. That's you with your word. So I think, again, it seemed like you guys were very much aligned with that. But you going into Louisville, I remember obviously the championship, so that was huge. But what were some of, let's say, the challenges aside from the championship run that you guys had? But what were some of the challenges that you faced in Louisville?
One, having to maintain that level of consistency about my work ethic and mentality, even through times where it's like, okay, maybe I took a little knock, I can't play for a few games, and this guy's succeeding in my place. Well, he's not going to just get this place just because I was playing all the 10 games prior. Well, I almost got to wait for him to make a mistake, but I can't hope that he makes a mistake. I still have to be a good teammate. So it's all these fine balances. And especially that was, 2015, 2016 even, I'm still kind of maturing, especially emotionally, and figuring out ways where, okay, I can still be a good teammate, but you know what? I can still make this guy have to work as hard as he possibly can to earn his spot week after week. So again, it takes time and experience, and it's definitely a lot easier said than done. But at the same time, once I started to learn how to navigate that process, it became super beneficial to me later in my career, where not only can I pass on that wisdom to other guys kind of going through it, having gone through it myself, but it really strengthened my mentality. It made me really strong. And so regardless of what my role it was for a specific day, whether it's for training, and I'm a guy that's on the bibs, and I have to help, the starting 11, even though it's not explicitly said, but everyone kind of knows the day prior to a match day -1, you can't try to outshine someone. You just got to do what's being asked of you. You got to be able to understand your role and do your best within whatever that role needs you to be. And so it takes time. You have to swallow a lot of pride. You have to keep your ego in check. Everyone has an ego, but you have to be able to navigate that space while maintaining a fine balance of all these different complex emotions and feelings. And the dynamic is tough. So it's not easy for everyone, especially for those who just have a weaker mentality.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. Ben Foster, I think you maybe know who he is, but he's a goalkeeper that, he has his own podcast now. He sat down with Tim Howard, and Tim Howard, I mean, maybe watching him, he's like very graceful now on TV, like seems like a super nice guy.
Yeah.
And then they asked him, I think it was Van der Sar or somebody had come in, and he's like, yeah, like when I wasn't playing, I was sitting on the bench, and people think I'm supposed to be cheering for the guy. Hell no. Hell no. I'm hoping he makes a mistake. I'm hoping he makes a blunder that's going to make the coach look at me, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah. It's like, I don't care. Like, he's like, and so I'm hearing that and like how cutthroat that is.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you're almost forced into submission of seeing the world and your professional lifestyle through that lens, versus trying to be so naive and just saying, oh, okay, like, go, keep playing well, keep doing what you got to do, man. Get those shutouts. What it's like, no. I'm hoping you mess up. I don't want to say injury, but I'm hoping you screw up, mess up, because if you do, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to pounce on it. So it seems like that is just like universal through all professional, not just sports. Anything you do in the world, if somebody's ahead of you, you support them. If it's your mentor, of course, maybe you have a little bit more appreciation and empathy for them. But if they mess up, it's like, no, I'm ready to go. And then at the end of the day, when that page is turned and you're the one in that role, somebody's waiting for you to mess up.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And some guys, you can either have that drive you to be better, but some guys, like I said before, with the weaker mentality might make them make a mistake because they're so worried about, okay, if I make a mistake, what's going to happen? Is he going to just sub him in right away? You make a mistake, start looking to the sideline, see if the coach is gesturing down to the bench. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it starts to play with your head, but not that I'm so accepting if I'm in that role where I'm like, okay, I got to take the back seat here for a minute. I can still take that role, but actively be like, well, yeah, I'm here now and I'll support you. But when it comes time for me to get my opportunity back, you're not getting it back. So you better make sure that you keep that thing, or else I'm taking it back and never letting it go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a similar mindset, but there's like little variations within it. I would say maybe Ben Foster's at like the extreme.
No, Tim Howard.
Or Tim Howard,
yeah,
sorry,
but,
at that point, maybe it's changed now. I don't know. But I would say I'm probably more in the middle, a little bit more level-headed, but still with like a dogged determination that once that spot's open again, I'm taking it. You're not getting it back.
Yeah, and I'm sure like the moment of scoring your goal against UC Riverside, your first collegiate goal against Riverside, knocked them out of the tournament. Now OKC, who's in the USL, Sacramento, who's in the USL, both of those teams passed on you, and now you see, whoa, I'm making a run with Louisville. I think it was your first or second year that you won.
My third year, actually.
Third year. Okay, so your third year that you were there.
My first 2 years, we get to the Eastern Conference Final and lost to the eventual champions.
Okay.
We lost to Rochester Rhinos in 2015. And in 2016, we lost to New York Red Bulls, too, who were like top team. In
Tyler Adams, all those guys,
Yeah, all those guys. And then it wasn't until my third year. But even to rewind a bit, like back in 2016, I was in preseason with Louisville. We were in Bradenton. We went to the IMG Academy. We spent maybe, 10 days there, more or less. Training every day, crazy. We do double, triple days, this and that. So there's a bunch of teams out there. MLS teams, even some USL teams, international teams even. Really awesome experience. I remember 2016, Oklahoma City was also there in IMG. They had the same coaching staff. Everyone that I had known prior. A few former players that I was still kind of friendly with. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting on the sidelines, randomly watching Oklahoma City play against, I don't know, an MLS team like New York City or something. And so I'm sitting next to James, my coach in Louisville, and I'm watching my former team. And that was like one of the first times I've watched like my former team play. And I don't even know how the conversation came about, but I ended up asking him, it's like, by the way, James, did you talk to the head coach of OKC prior to like signing me and offering me a contract? And he goes, actually, Tarek, yes, I did. And between me and you, he actually told me not to sign you. He told me you were a cancer in the locker room. He told me you had a bad attitude. He was saying all these negative things about you. And when he said that, I was like, wait, what? I was so confused. I was shocked. I was like, where is he getting this from? Like, why would he say that? And it was like, James had already known me for at least a year now. And so he knew those things, obviously, after having that relationship with me over the course of a year, were like false. But then James ended up continuing. He was like, but I talked to Dookie. And Dookie was this, his nickname is Duke, or Dookie, but his real name is Christian Duke, who we had played with in Orlando together prior to James going to Louisville, prior to Dookie going to Sporting Kansas City, prior to Dookie getting loaned from Sporting Kansas City to Oklahoma City. So they had a relationship. And so when Dookie would get loaned down to OKC, me and him were cool. We were friends. Even though he would play at the 6 and he would displace me sometimes, I still had a good relationship with him. And so after it didn't work out with OKC and James is kind of asking around about me, he ends up hitting Christian Duke. And Christian Duke, not like he had told me before, like, hey, you want me to put in a good word for you, whatever. He just gave James genuine assessment of who I was, my personality, my character, etc. And that's who James based his opinion of me as a personality and me and my character and my attitude and everything. That's what he based it on. So he kind of disregarded what OKC coach said and said, well, let me see what this person that I know, that I have a relationship with, thinks about me after spending enough time with me for us to have a relationship together. And so when James told me this thing, I was like, oh my God, this is starting to make sense now. This is probably why SAC didn't want to sign me. These are probably why all these teams weren't interested, because this guy was probably going around telling other teams that I was this, and that, all these negative things. I got confirmation later on from someone that was helping me speak to Sacramento, say that, this this is what he actually said. I didn't want to tell you before, but this is what he was hearing about you. I was like, are you kidding me, man? This guy, I don't know if he had a vendetta out against me or what, but it followed me for years off of BS. And so after hearing this from James, I'm like, damn, that's cold. But like, thank God. One, not only that I'm not this person, but like I maintain good relationships with people, and that's come to pay dividends years later now. Now I'm in this, incredible place in Louisville, and I'm enjoying my football. I'm learning a lot. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't keep a good relationship with my teammates, even guys that were displacing me from the lineup. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy how everything is kind of connected? I mean, I'm sure in any space, but especially in the soccer world, for sure, like everyone knows someone who knows someone. And after burning that bridge, early, before I was even a rookie, it was with Galaxy, not that I had this, incredible epiphany that I was like, okay, now I got to start maintaining relationships with people. No, it was just like naturally I was being how I am, just like a genuine good person. And that's what James really placed a lot of value on players on, of just them being great people and being great players. Like, you need to be well-rounded. And so thankfully, my relationship with a teammate who, like I said, was displacing me sometimes, almost every game, or a lot of the times, I had a good relationship enough with him that he put in a good word with me without me even asking him to. And that helped me set up myself for success for that next stage of my career without even me doing it intentionally. You know what I mean? So that gave me kind of my first experience into like, damn, some people just, for whatever reason or another, just may not like you. And you got to make sure that you really nurture relationships with those that are around you and that support you, because it could pay dividends later on down the road, which it did for me. So that was a huge thing that happened, especially in my time in Louisville, that I look back on. I was like, damn, I learned a lot from that, and I carry that with me throughout my career and try to pass on to other guys for sure.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
That is, you're talking about just being mindful. Don't be someone that you're not, but being mindful that if someone is affecting you in such a way that now floods into your relationships with other people, stop it. Right. Because like you're saying, being mindful of how you treat other people and how you communicate to other people, no one really gets the full context of why you're angry or why you're upset. Mm-hmm. So no one's going to stop and say, well, Tarek, what's going on, man? Like, talk to me. They're going to be like, oh, wow, he looked at me a little bit different today. He didn't say anything to me today. Okay, I'm going to categorize him now in this category of somebody who's cancer. Right. And I think that's very tough to kind of hear, I think, because you're not controlling the narrative anymore. Right. But I think thankfully you were able to see someone or meet somebody who looked past that. Right. And then I think he was able to justify it even more by talking to Dookie or Christian Duke, and then also to justify it by actually having you. And now he's probably realizing, okay, I'm going to change the narrative now. Anytime if he progresses from here, I'm going to make sure now that I put my stamp of approval on Tarek, because he's somebody that I've worked with and I know he fits the billing for having, top character. For sure. So it was definitely a very eye-opening experience. And then, having that relationship with James, that we can be open and transparent with one another, have that trust within another to even tell these types of things to each other was super important. It helped kind of shape my view of how relationships should be with anyone through an organization. That open and honest transparency is something that I've really appreciated throughout my years, and that I look for now, not only just in the locker room with players, but just through the staff. Like, I want open, honest transparency. I want accountability. I want all these, attributes that are so important to having a good culture where everyone is going to be able to succeed within this culture. So that kind of helped guide my next stage after 2017, winning the championship. I'm ambitious. I'm in my mid-20s. I just finished an incredible season. I'm ready for that next step. So I'm waiting around to maybe get some like MLS invites, and nothing was kind of coming along. And I was not super hopeful, but I was like, well, I had a good enough season here. We had good enough eyes on us. I should be able to get something. I had more agents kind of
I was in touch with. I hadn't really signed with an agent, but I was getting a lot more people interested in representing me at the time. So I got myself to a point in my career where it's like, okay, now I'm a little bit established. I have 4 years of professional career or professional experience in my career. So now I have more connections. I should hopefully get an opportunity again to come back and see if I can prove myself in that next step up. And so just waiting weeks, nothing was happening. I know I needed a new challenge. And so I left Louisville knowing I wasn't going to come back. They would have offered me another contract, but I was at the end of my contract. I won after 3 years of devoting my life towards something that was like really, really hard to do. I just knew it was time to move on. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe not MLS. Let's see what Europe is talking about. Man, I want to say, honestly, over the course of like a few weeks, I would say by this time it's like early 2018, I am like researching like crazy on Google, looking at all these big agencies in different markets. I'm looking in Scandinavia. I'm looking everywhere to try to get in contact with people who can connect me to clubs. I'm making all my highlight tapes and, updating my CV. I'm going through this whole process essentially of just trying to get noticed by people outside of the US, just so I can challenge myself in a different space. I was already comfortable in the USL at that point. So I need to step outside of that comfort zone and find a new challenge that was going to push me to higher heights, essentially. And so nothing was happening for Europe. I probably copy and pasted the same email to maybe 100 agents, that were essentially supposedly located throughout Europe. And so it eventually got to a point where I was looking up like Egyptian players playing in Europe and seeing who was representing them, contacting those agents. And
you are Egyptian, by the way, so everybody
I am Egyptian.
Okay.
And so I was like, maybe that's a route. Maybe, I'll have this Egyptian connection that would maybe come connect me into Europe. And so that was my thinking throughout that process. Ultimately, I ended up connecting with someone who didn't represent anyone in Europe, but worked within an agency that was big enough that had other agents that were located within Europe. So they were pretty much scattered around everywhere. And he was like the, Cairo, Egypt-based agent, essentially. Got in contact with him. He was like the only one out of like over 100 people that I probably emailed. I probably still have those emails, maybe unread or left unread. I don't know. But he ended up responding to me and was like interested in having a video call with me. So we talked, went back and forth for a bit. And so he was like, look, the transfer window is closed at the moment, but if you come out here and get yourself situated, we could train. We can have a look at you. I'll hopefully line up some really good teams over here, at least in Egypt, and then we can maybe go from there. And I was like, dang, this might be like a 3-4 month process at least. Like, I'm over here, I'm looking at all the other teams that I had just turned down in the US start their preseasons. It's like January, February. And I'm like, damn, man, you know what? Screw it. Literally off of just like an impulse, I go online, I book a flight to Cairo, and I just tell him, hey, I'm coming like on this date. Can you pick me up, essentially? So I went to Cairo. I asked him to help me find an apartment. And so he ended up finding me a few options. He was sending it to me over WhatsApp, and I ended up choosing an apartment, which was, I don't know, that was my first experience into living in a third world country. I was in a nice apartment. And so go to Egypt. I'm there. I'm kind of like, I'm Egyptian, but I've never been immersed into that culture now. I'm so used to lifestyle in the US in a more general sense. And now I'm being immersed into Cairo, Egypt, underdeveloped. You don't get Wi-Fi everywhere you go. You don't even get service everywhere you go. Little things that I just like took for granted that I was like, damn, this is going to be tough. The language barrier, even though I speak Arabic, not to the point where I'm like, I can speak comfortably.
Self-sufficient out there.
Right. Yeah. With Egyptians out there, and not feel embarrassed by my own lack of ability to speak to a level of being fluent enough to be able to hold a conversation, even to go out to a restaurant. So it was tough. The first month was really, really hard. Yeah. I remember for sure. And then getting comfortable, training out there, working out there, having to find a routine. I had so much time on my hands. I'm like, what the hell do I do with my time? I didn't have friends. I couldn't call my family or all my friends all the time. There wasn't like FaceTime and stuff. It was a really tough process for sure. And this would go on for weeks and weeks and weeks until summer got closer. And then my agent started telling me, okay, I might have this trial lined up with this team. We have to wait for the season to end and also the World Cup to end. So just keep working and keep yourself ready, because it could come, on a day's notice or less. Things aren't that structured out there. In the Egyptian Premier League, you might have, 5 or 6 top teams, and there's a huge drop off in terms of the quality and structure and financial backing of the rest of the Premier League, essentially. And so I'm just waiting. Within that waiting period, you come out to visit me. Omar Issa comes out to visit me. That was nice. Obviously, I got to see like familiar faces after having, only new faces every, corner I turned pretty much while I was out there.
But I did see that was like my eye-opening experience of like, no matter what you do in the U.S. soccer system, if you are in the USL and you win a championship, I thought that granted you access into going to preseason now with MLS teams. Right. I was shocked to see your progression, and then seeing how you won the championship, and then now you're in Egypt, and then maybe I forget, but it was kind of getting the runaround. Hey, you're gonna have a trial. Then that trial didn't happen, right. And then I'm seeing you on this turf field, which at the time in Cairo was like 130 degrees.
You remember that?
Yeah, and you're doing like your own running. The guys you're training with, you can tell some have some experience. Other guys who were no experience at all. Yeah. So it seemed like it was just a pickup here in LA. Right. And I was just like, maybe I was just naive and kind of confused, because I never had my ear to the ground of how U.S. soccer and how things are supposed to go. Right. But now I'm realizing nothing is guaranteed. You are literally starting from scratch, unless you are like a super draft guy where that stamp has been placed on you and then it follows you forever. Right. It's kind of the opposite now. When you're a USL guy, they stamp that on you, and it's kind of like, oh shoot, I can keep on like spinning my wheels in this environment. Right. Or like you're saying, I can kind of take a chance, bet on myself a little bit, go somewhere else and see where it goes. And you did that. And that to me was kind of a shocker, because I was like, man, I think he could have just had his comfort zone and stayed in it.
Right. And so that was a tough thing to kind of grapple with, was like that comfort zone. Okay, I've already somewhat established myself. I won a championship. That already gives you a stamp of approval or credibility within at least that league, as it's still growing. So in a sense, it wasn't like a huge risk, but it also was, because it's like, okay, if I go to Egypt, like I can't just come back immediately and show up at someone's doorstep and they'll just sign me right away. Well, it's like, okay, what the hell have you been doing for the last 6 months? Are you even fit? And like, are you sharp? Whatever. And so
you were fit.
I was fit.
It was so hot out there, so I was like taking off my shirt. Then I saw your shirt off at the beach, and I was like, maybe I put my shirt back on. This is not gonna fly for me.
Right. And so, if anyone's listening to this, go visit Alexandria, Egypt, where I took Omar, and it's one of the most beautiful places you could go. The north coast of Egypt is incredible, and so throughout that time of me waiting for a team to actually bring me out on trial, like you said, I was just training and working out every day, sometimes just by myself for months. This was like something maybe only someone who could have gone through the experiences that I had gone through already prior could have been able to deal with, having gone through those adversities. It was definitely something that was rewarding in that aspect of like me being able to push myself like mentally to keep determined and stay prepared at any moment. In that sense, it was rewarding. And when it came time to actually trial with these teams, it wasn't as rewarding as I had prepared for months for. In that the first team I went to go trial for was a team called Arab Contractors. Al-Ma'awloon is what they're called in Arabic. And they were one of the top clubs in the Egyptian Premier League. They had Mohamed Salah before he went to Europe. That's the only real name I need to tell you, to be honest. Yes. Most people won't know any of the names. Me getting a trial there, I was like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. This is a team that has proven they can send a player to Europe. Not that that I'm to his level, but that they have the capability and that I have a unique experience also in the US that may also make me look a little bit more attractive to maybe European clubs, maybe even in lower leagues, whatever. I was there for 3 weeks. At this point, you had already gone home right before I was starting my trial process, and I was performing really well. The first day I went to training with them, it's a crazy trial process, by the way. The first day I get there, no one knows who the hell I am. My agent's there, and he's kind of just like taking me, saying, "Hey, this is Tarek. Like, he's gonna come train with you." Like, there's no kit, man. There's no any of this. They don't have, equipment for you to prepare your body. They don't have mini bands. They don't have foam rollers. Yeah. So it's like you show up to the stadium, you put on your boots, and you go train. You're in this like pretty like rundown locker room. I didn't even have a locker. I had a chair kind of like in the middle of the room, in the middle of everyone, kind of embarrassing. Like, I don't know anyone here. So it's nerve wracking. I'm like showing up to training. I'm like, they don't have clothes for me. Okay, I'm going to just put on my boots. I'm ready for training. I'm wearing my pretty much like athletic wear that I came in, like something like that, if you can get a visual. Mm-hmm. And so eventually they're like, no, you have to put on training gear. I'm like, well, I've been sitting here for half an hour. Anyways, I go get this training gear, put it on real quick, go out to train. I do really well in training. My agent's watching up in the stand. He's like all pumped for me. And so I have a good training session. Immediately after the training session, I sit in the office with the head coach and my agent, and essentially says, "Oh, we like Tarek. We want to keep him. Tell him to come back tomorrow and he can stay in they actually had like rooms within their training facility." And so throughout that preseason process, I stayed with them at their stadium, and I was with them for maybe 3 weeks there in Cairo before they were going to go up to, I think, Alexandria to go continue their preseason training camp. And so the day of me being ready to go to Alexandria with them after going back to my apartment in Cairo, which was probably 30 minutes away from where the stadium was, I got my stuff, came back. We had another preseason match against a team that morning before the drive or the bus up to Alexandria, which is 3 hours away. Played that match, did pretty good, and was ready to hop on the bus right before literally my agent comes and he goes, "All right, come on, let's go." I said, "Go where? What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, I just talked to the coach. He doesn't want you anymore." I was like, "Wait, what do you mean he doesn't want me anymore? What the heck? I've just been here for the last like 3+ weeks. What do you mean he doesn't want me anymore?" He goes, "I'll tell you about it in the car." And I'm like, what is going on right now? And so I just reluctantly, I get in the car and he tells me like, "Look, we can't do anything about it. There's this hierarchy system that within the coaching staffs in most, if not all, the teams in Egypt, especially in the Premier League, where the assistants are almost like agents. If they're able to bring a player and the club signs them, they get a percentage." And so because no assistant had brought me in, I was kind of coming in off the streets pretty much on my own. One of the assistants was like so against wanting to sign me, but everyone else was apparently. It just happened to be the first assistant. It was like on the hierarchy of assistants. He was the top assistant. And so no player could get approved until all assistants approved of that player or whatever to sign them. And so they didn't sign me. It was done. All the time and effort that I had just put in for 3.5 weeks with this club just went in the trash. They ended up bringing a player. They just signed this young kid. He brought him in. Of course, they got a cut out of it. It's just political, corrupt BS. And so transfer windows aren't very long. I had just dedicated 3.5 weeks to one team who I was pretty convinced I was going to sign with and play and do well for myself, hopefully. That was the hope, at least. I just lost 3.5 weeks. So time was extremely crucial and valuable for the next couple weeks of that transfer window in that summer. Now we're scrambling. Now in scramble mode. I'm looking for clubs. Everyone's like, "Oh, like where's this guy coming from?" All of a sudden, all random. Again, it was one of those situations where it was like we were almost putting all of our eggs into one basket, and I didn't really have anything much to fall back on. And so I maybe had some interest from one club who was kind of like a mid-table type club who didn't have good financial backing, wasn't good structurally. So it was going to be like, okay, this is like, I got to really be mentally strong to play here. Swallowed my pride, went out to go on trial with them, and doing well for myself. They liked me. They wanted me to keep coming back. I remember after maybe a week, and I don't think it was mentioned prior, but they ended up finding out I was with Arab Contractors. And so they were like, well, if Arab Contractors didn't want him, then sorry, like, we don't want him. And so it was almost a knock on me that I went to go on trial with them. So then I just wasted another week.
Oh, my goodness.
So over a month of just on trial with clubs, of just like every day having to come in, trying to prove myself. And then all these things are happening and being used against me that I can't control.
Yeah.
And so it was tough to continue to stay motivated throughout that process. And ultimately what ended up happening was the transfer window was narrowing. It wasn't likely that I was going to be able to sign with any club that had any decent financial backing or structure, that had the ability or capability to attract scouts from maybe Europe or other countries that maybe I would be interested in playing in. And so I ended up happening to be messaged by an agent in the US again, who had messaged me asking how I was doing, if I had any representation, where I was at, essentially. Because ultimately he was like, well, what the heck, Tarek fell off the radar? Where the hell did this guy go? He wins the USL Championship and he just leaves. Like, he must have ended up somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so just through that process of me kind of like letting him know what's happening at the moment, he ended up going, well, look, I actually might have a club for you back here in the US. And I was like, well, I might entertain it. You know, I'm still kind of hoping something works out for me here, but I would say it's not likely. So yeah, just like keep me posted, let me know. So he ends up getting back to me within a few days and telling me that Tampa was interested. I'm like kind of weighing my options. At this point, I'm like, man, I don't have too many options. Do I want to go back to the USL though? I've just left there with the intention of signing somewhere abroad overseas so I can get some real playing experience over here and maybe hopefully get an opportunity in the MLS or something, you know, because I've seen that happen where they've just, you know, an MLS team has signed a guy from the Egyptian Premier League from this random club. Another MLS has signed an Egyptian team an Egyptian player that came from an Egyptian team from some random club. So I'm like, damn, maybe there's a trend here. Maybe I'll go to Egypt, play, and then I can go back to MLS, if anything. And so things didn't end up working out that way. And then I ended up signing out with Tampa after spending 6 months of my life in Egypt. And initially it was tough just kind of reconciling with that and being like, damn, did I just waste 6 months of my life? Like for what? Essentially, that was like my initial mind. Exactly. Coping with that whole process would be like, you know, for what? Like not only wasted my life, but like career wise, I just missed out on 15, 20 matches. You know what I mean? By this time, we're talking August of 2018, and I went there like in March. That was tough. But then coming into Tampa, forget about the heat. I was used to the heat. I wasn't used to the humidity. But that's a whole nother topic. But that was like, okay, I'm back in the USL Championship. Almost kind of back where I started, but it was this weird feeling of like me just trying to try to understand everything that just happened over the prior 6 months, and me still processing that, and me trying to be like, you know what? Okay, I got a few months here. This team's not doing well. I need like real games that are official. Let me at least go try to make something of these couple months, then reassess and figure out what to do next. I finished out those couple months, made some good relationships within my time there. From literally, I showed up from Egypt on a flight. I was in a hotel, slept, woke up. I trained with their assistant who stayed behind because the team was on a road trip somewhere, I think Ottawa or something. And they come back and they have like a day or two of rest. So I'm still not training with the team the first couple of days. And then they have a match day -1, and then they play a whole match on a midweek or something like that. And so I trained with the team once, and then I got thrown into the starting 11.
Wow.
And thankfully, I was fit enough to play 90 because I was ultra prepared, and I would just come off my own preseason. So it's not like I was coming into it cold. So then I start my first match. play full 90. I'm exhausted. This is August in Tampa, Florida. Like, it's not fun weather to play in. Finish that match. I do well for myself. We might have like 10 matches left in the season, maybe the last third that I finally came onto the team. The chances were slim, and the team had good financial backing.
It's one of the top teams.
One of the top teams in terms of at least financial backing, and now it's like competitively, like they're one of the top teams for sure. They had a different owner when I got there. And then the 2019 season, when I decided to stay, they had new ownership. So it kind of changed a little bit in that way. But at the same time, the team was trying to do like a rebuilding phase. They were stopped signing the likes of a Joe Cole. They stopped signing the likes of like a Marcel Schaefer, guys that were coming from these top clubs in Europe or had these, long, lengthy, illustrious careers, and were starting to kind of rebrand themselves as a club. And that's kind of started with the process of them hiring their current coach, Neil. And so I kind of came into the fold when he started to establish himself through his transition of being a player and a coach. And so my time in Tampa was good. I actually really enjoyed it out there. It was a really high quality environment. The level of demand and the level of play was really good. And so we were a really good team my second season there in 2019. And after spending enough time there, I was able to kind of process everything that kind of happened in Egypt. And I would even kind of share a lot of that with the guys there in Tampa. Like Joe would ask me about Egypt because he knew I just came from Egypt. Asked me how, the quality was, this and that. What was my experience? Did I sign with anyone? And so it's tough to kind of grasp that. I was there for 6 months, didn't have a contract, but just finding a way to wake up every day. And some days it was hard. Some days I didn't succeed in being able to wake up and have the motivation to go work out and train. And that was okay. I kind of needed to just have those days where, you know what, if you're not feeling it on a certain day, like maybe I've earned the right just from going through everything that I've gone through. So it was tough, but I was able to kind of reflect back on my journey up until that point, thinking about how many adversities I had already gone through and where that had led me. And so I kind of took a step back and thought about my experience in Egypt from a more personal side of things. I was like, you know what, that was so rewarding in so many ways. I was able to reconnect with my family. I was able to reconnect with my culture, with my identity. All these things I have so much more value in now that I just took for granted throughout like my whole youth and young adulthood growing up in Southern California. I'd taken all these things for granted. And so by the time I came back and I saw my family again, I was just like super proud. I was super proud to be Egyptian. I was super proud to, be in that Middle Eastern community and like everything that had led me up to that point. So I completely changed my experience after I had already experienced it. You know what I mean? So yeah, really rewarding.
I mean, that's the perspective shift that I think a lot of people, when you're trying to reconcile with all that and then ask yourself, and I'm sure you got closer to God, right? You're like, why is this happening to me? Yeah. And then I think you're saying, I think in the moments we don't really know what we're going through and why we're going through it, but as you progress through it, I always tell people like trying to be as aware and intentional as you can so that the tools that you're intentionally trying to cope with what you're dealing with, you can actually say, oh, that tool or that resource helped me a lot. I'm going to use that for every single, piece of adversity that I have in the future. And it sounds like over time, which I think is important, that over time process is where a lot of things I think start to unfold for you and start to kind of have breakthroughs of, okay, I went through this because of this, or now I'm dealing with this adversity now, and I can reflect back on my time in Egypt and recognize it was a lot worse there. Right. So, and I still got up and did my thing. Right. This is not that bad. I can get through it. So it seems like you were able to funnel all those experiences and continue to use them as you've continued your career. And now at Oakland Roots, there was a period there, San Diego. Right. But after that, Oakland Roots, and now you're on your second, you have a multi-year contract you just signed, or?
I just extended it another year.
Okay.
After playing these first 2 seasons with the club in the USL. Going into my 10th season in the league, and then my 3rd season with Oakland. It's good to kind of reflect back on, like, it almost feels like this was purposeful and that, like, okay, this is almost like my 10-year, almost like anniversary, like, of starting my 10th season. But it's cool to kind of look back at my journey up until where I'm at today with Oakland, who, you know, in so many ways I align with what their, you know, identity and their ethos. It's a club like I want so badly to succeed. You know, I want to be, you know, a driving force through their trajectory. And, you know, the reason why I extended my contract another year was just my continued like hope and optimism that they can be the club that I think they can be. I think they can be a top club, not only just for, you know, clubs within this league, within, you know, the competitive realm, within what the club means within a community, and how they can kind of shift how clubs are viewed just in general, or just professional organizations in general. But like, I think they're in a region, in an area. One, I love being in California. You know, it's easy to come down here. I just flew down yesterday, and so it's nice being kind of close to home in a sense. But being able to be an organization at this stage of my career where it's like, okay, look, not that I can't still grow more and don't have the desire to grow more and develop as a player, but just as a person, there's a lot of things that I see that could help benefit my career if I took the time to actually, whether it's building relationships, or just making connections, or just trying to learn about things other than just being a footballer and showing up and working every day. You know what I mean? Yeah. So definitely part of my reason why I wanted to sign another year.
Man, again, this is the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I remember all these experiences are coming in here. Say, right, my mom will be like, "Oh, did you hear what happened to Tarek?" And like, in my head, I'm like, I just left him in Egypt. He's, you know, it seemed pretty promising that he's going to go and do this and that. And then she's telling me what your mom is telling my mom. And I'm just like, gossiping. Oh, yeah. So I'm just like, oh, wow. I, you know, it's the outside looking in. It's very difficult sometimes to understand the full context and like the decisions and all of the adversity that you're going through. Mm-hmm. But now obviously having you on here and hearing all these stories and recognizing that a lot of things were promised and then they were taken, and then now you're kind of on an island on your own and trying to figure out what's the best possible solution for me, because I'm not going to give up. Right. Like you said early in the podcast, it was like, just keep knocking on doors. And it seems like that's I think for everybody who I've had on player wise, that's what it is. It's just like Armando said, if you're good enough, somebody's going to sign you. Right. And I think that it's this podcast hopefully is something that young kids will listen to and recognize that, like, oh my God, one, you can control the narrative up to a certain point, but do your best to control the narrative, because that will come back to you at some point. Somebody will speak highly of you. But also too, it's like, just keep trying to get better. Always try to improve. And if you can't improve on the field and you feel like that's a dead end, improve on the personal side. Right. And if that's a dead end, then retire. but any last words, man? Because I know we're running a little bit late here, but any last words for you? Maybe some advice for anybody who is starting their career, trying to get to college, or they're trying to go from college to the pros?
I would say, like to kind of summarize a lot of what we already kind of spoke about. You know, the common themes of things that I went through my career that were really eye-opening was how important your relationship with everyone is. Everybody. Regardless if you have a single interaction with someone, make that a good interaction. You know what I mean? Because it could, in some way, shape, or form, come back to you in some way, either positive or negative. So nourish relationships. Understand that everything you say to someone is important. So really make your words count. And obviously actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. So you can't just say something and not truly follow up with it with action. You got to be someone who's trustworthy. That's one of the most undervalued probably characteristics that kids don't even think about, is that you got to be reliable. You got to be trustworthy. You got to be able to, let's say maybe in the 90th minute, if you've been playing a certain role for a few games, the coach should come sub you in and be like, Tarek, I need you to just close out this game. Give us everything you got, even if it's 3 minutes. Win every header. And you got to say, okay, coach, I'm going to go do that. Mm-hmm. You got to be someone that a coach can transfer to a different club, and you're a free agent, and he doesn't give a second thought to wanting to bring you onto his team and signing you, because you've built this relationship and trust with him where he knows what he's going to be able to expect from you. You know what I mean? So I would say the common theme of all this is how important relationships are. Not that you have to go out of your way to go nurture a relationship, but every interaction you have with someone, make it count.
Amen. Well, thanks to you. I appreciate it, man. I know it's your 10th season now, so I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that now we don't have to play against you, so I don't have to worry about your results. I can just second cheer for you the full season. But I wish you all the best, continued success, and hopefully we can do this podcast in, 3-4 years from now, and then we have even more chapters to discuss.
Let's do it, bro.
I appreciate it, man. Take care.
Oh, you too.